The Fraud and the Id-iot. Sigmund Freud, big name in the psychoanalysis field. Everyone's heard of him. And I don't think he's not widely respected by, he's not really a celebrity, but yeah, in universities, in the psychology field, yeah, he still has followers. And unfortunately, his method is now widely adopted. That's the method of sit down and talk to me, fool. Talking is good for you. I'll listen and maybe comment later. Absolutely, absolutely useless. Well, who was Freud? I mean, he really wasn't so different from us. It's tempting to think these big names are different from us, but he wasn't so different. And maybe he's not so big. He's just a manager for the world controlling class, WCC, just a manager. Just like us, he had his weaknesses. He was hopelessly in love while in university. Before or after, I guess, he was a coke addict and was a chronic smoker. Supposedly, he had mouth cancer and a prosthesis for part of his jaw. It's hard to imagine, but so they say. In any case, he is credited with inventing psychoanalysis. I'm tempted to break that word into three pieces: sicko, anal, and Isis. Coincidentally, Isis was the Greek goddess of, among other things, healing. But there were no goddesses of mental healing, were there? No, they don't want us to be mentally healthy and fit. Don't even want us to think about it, perhaps. Um, we credit Freud with inventing psychoanalysis and inventing a framework for the human mind, absolutely banal and mm, something that surprised no one, really. He claimed that essentially all humans, seek pleasure. Oh, what a discovery that is. We didn't need you to tell us that. But how do you define pleasure? He didn't define it very nicely. Very degrading definition. Apparently, it's all about eating when you're a child, sex when you get to the age of, I think it was 6. Yeah, these people are sick. And then he included aggression as one of the pleasures. Yeah, it takes a sick man to think of that. I'm sure some people do get pleasure from aggression. We do live in sadistic times indeed. And some of us are becoming like our masters. Anyway, all this desire for pleasure, he named the pleasure principle that gives it the air of academia and truth, the pleasure principle. And he also told us that the superego is responsible for trying to stop this pleasure, the id seeks pleasure. The superego seeks to stop that because the superego is an expression of civilized values, ethics, morals. It is oppressive, repressive, call it what you will. But I don't see it that way. I see civilization as a thing that offers its own pleasures. Debased they may be, but nevertheless they are pleasures of some sort. For example, porn, prostitution, violent entertainments that stimulate adrenaline and dopamine responses, and much more. And what else? We forgot the ego. Yes, the ego allegedly tries to mediate and navigate and harmonize the superego and the id. Tries to make peace between them. Yeah, without the superego, yeah, we'd all be savages, wouldn't we? Rapists and savages. Thank goodness for civilization, and thank goodness for the superego trying to impose civilized values. Apparently, Freud had no conception of such pleasures as child rearing. Yes, it can be pleasant, although civilization has mostly ruined that pleasure. Gardening, immersion in nature, good sense of humor, if that's still possible. And nowadays, seems like humor always consists of mocking others. Self-effacing humor is rare. And art, well, art has been spoiled and ruined also by the world culture corruptors. But yes, they should have honorable mentions, shouldn't they? They should give pleasure, and I say should because, well, mostly they don't any longer. But they didn't make they didn't come on, they weren't mentioned ever by Freud. And that's, I think, by design. He wanted to give us a degrading portrait of ourselves. Freud also imagined a death drive, a self-destructive drive. That sounds perfectly reasonable, doesn't it? Well, some people are certainly driven to ruin themselves with destructive habits and addictions and are driven to suicide. I just heard that 5% of deaths in the UK are now euthanasia deaths. And I think the Netherlands might be ahead of them. And Canada is on pace to surpass them. And of course, virtually everyone choosing to die is a European. I don't know if that's proof that, white people are being targeted. I think it's proof that white people being subject to the most advanced civilized modes of living are simply more likely to be very physically or mentally sick. Well, it's all it's nice for Freud to say this is part of human nature, the death drive. Yeah, not of course, civilization is off the hook. The ruling class that is responsible for shaping and steering our civilization is off the hook. Of course, it is, because Freud was a tool of the ruling class. Well, the ego, back to the ego, trying to balance between those savage drives and civilizing values. It's not the ego. Why not just call it consciousness? And yes, it pursues pleasure. We all do, or at least leisure. It's almost pleasure without the P. Pursues them within the constraints created by civilization, which is controlled by the people who want us to suffer and degrade ourselves. I don't say that lightly. It's many years of reflection and research have brought me to the conclusion that we are ruled by sadists. Well, what were Freud's solutions for the suffering imposed on us? Well, he apparently considered cocaine as a psychiatric drug, abandoned it when he discovered somehow, amazingly, that it was addictive. Surprise, surprise. I'm not sure I can take these stories seriously. He also apparently experimented with electroshock therapy, as if civilization isn't shocking enough. And he experimented with hypnosis. Well, wonderful idea there. We're already, most of us are already hypnotized into believing endless nonsense, hypnotized into a state of non-thinking. That would be the general definition, I think, of hypnosis: not thinking, not mentally active. And fourth, lastly, he invented the Freudian mental model psychotherapy. I guess the therapist tries to play the role of the ego and tries to establish peace. Well, not quite. The Freudian model isn't strictly applied, rarely in psychotherapy. Mostly, the psychoanalyst assumes that the free speech and free speaking of the patient will lead the patient to reveal details that the analyst, therapist, can use to diagnose the problem and prescribe a solution. This method is not so unlike the confessional of Catholic tradition, in which the sinner simply confessed his or her sins, and the priest said, "Thank you. Now please say your prayers, and you will be forgiven." It's not unlike psychotherapy, I think. It's quite mundane, quite easy, and really not productive. Although people do repress their traumas and will speak about them if they feel they are with a trusted friend or professional, merely talking about a problem is not a very effective treatment. Jews have been talking about anti-Semitism and the Holocaust for some 60 years, and they're still not finished talking about it. Jewphobes, never weary of blaming and fearing Jews. Democrats never stop talking about those terrible, terrible Republicans. And yes, that goes vice versa. And there are variations of that chattering happens in every country. We all know how little good talking usually achieves. It can consist of venting, blaming, and self-pity. Without fail, the patient will express their trauma. It could be the guilt of failure at something, or having witnessed something traumatic, or having done something to someone else traumatic. But if we believe Freud's case studies, all our troubles are related to degenerate pleasures, desires, and fears. And this degeneracy is always created by or caused by family members, perhaps fathers especially. Oh, men are so bad. Men are getting the short shift in this world. Um, the Oedipal complex. Let us not forget that most curious theory that all children desire to sleep with their mother or father and kill the other. I think it's the Oedipal complex, and for boys, and the Electra complex for girls. Who in their right mind would invent such theories? What evidence do you have of this? None whatsoever, except some stupid Greek tragedy, which I've analyzed into, exposed for its nonsense in Counterfeit Classics. Well, I suppose if you're a Freudian, you think only civilization, your superego, can stop you from lusting for your parents. Freud never mentioned that maybe fathers lust for daughters or sons. It can happen in our degenerate civilization. In brief, Freud pulled the wool over our eyes, actually insulted us, and we took it square on the chin. He never blamed the system, our culture, our religions, the economy, the ruling class, or the civilization it created for us. All our problems are hoisted onto our shoulders, the shoulders of family members too. He wasn't even interested in the Great War he lived through, or any war. I'm sure there were others in his lifetime. He did manage to keep ticking until his 90s, I believe. Well, I understand. Maybe I understand why he wasn't interested in thinking, believing that wars might be responsible for some of our mental problems. After all, he considered aggression a pleasure. Yeah, it must be good. But economic hardship and our culture, our degenerate culture, it should concern every psychologist, psychiatrist, psychoanalyst. Unfortunately, all mental health fields were created to protect the ruling class and the civilization it's created for us, it is responsible for economic hardship. It is responsible for creating a culture that encourages stupid behaviors. And well, it is also responsible for the past, isn't it? The past that I've worked so diligently to expose, that very traumatic past, perhaps experienced by our ancestors not more than 150, 200 years ago. That could be less than 10 generations ago, considerably less, perhaps. I'm talking about the the WCC's willful destruction of the world's food forests on which millions of people depended for life. I'm referring to their campaign to imprison and enslave millions of people underground, and of their strategy of separating infants from their parents so that they could be, what's the right word? Reprogrammed to be a bit like us. That trauma was doubtlessly passed from generation to generation, hopefully weakening over time, but perhaps reaching through time as far as my generation, and maybe beyond. What is the solution? In my opinion, I mean, obviously, I don't think the mental health fields are very useful. In my opinion, we need to strive for mental fitness. And I think I am the only person who speaks about or uses this phrase, mental fitness. And I've developed it. It's not just a couple of words joined together. It's a fully fleshed out theory. To build mental strength means doing the opposite of the self-esteem and love yourself movement. That is for wusses, if I may use a little slang. I love myself so much. Yeah, I'm sure Hitler loved himself too and esteemed himself very highly, if I may use the name of a man who we know very little about. And it's my mental fitness concept theory is also the opposite of the self-hatred and self-pity trend. Building mental strength means developing immunity to insults and disappointments. It means if someone insults you, you don't say, "Oh, that's not very nice. You're a horrible, hateful person." You just say, "Bring it on. Don't you have any worse words to fling at me? Do you really think I can be harmed by mere words? I'm a master of my mind and of all the words that enter it. You cannot spoil my good mood." One of my fondest memories was some 5 years ago. I was insulted 3 times to my face by a teacher of all people. And after each insult, I think the first one was, "You are narcissistic." And I said, "You're right," with a smile and very calmly. And then she said, "And you're insensitive." And I said, "You're right." I wasn't affected. And the last one was, "You're stupid." And I said, "You're right." that just proves that I was completely unaffected by her best weapons. We should all be a little more like that. Well, I must admit I was in a particularly good mood when she caught me, so can't always be in such a great mood, I suppose. But let's try. Let's try to build the mental fitness. We should all build the mental fitness that would make us really immune to insults and would help make us laugh at such things as the politically correct movement and all this pronoun BS. Please call me whatever you like. I don't care. And maybe it's fun to adopt the wrong pronouns once in a while. For fun, not because we really care. Please, it's a pronoun. Um, how can we build such mental strength? Well, I've developed quite a document. Let's call it that. I have named it the hexagon. Where is it? Come here, you hexagon. There it is. It is it's been appended to 4 of my 6 books, and it is in various places in my 2 other books. It is, I think, the most important work in my extensive work, and it includes the Masters of Mind, which includes 9 topics for meditation, for mental strength, for developing mental strength. No, insulting yourself is not is not one of them, but it does involve meditating on perhaps unpleasant things, like imagining that all your friends are only pretending to be your friends. You really have no friends, and that all your gods are dead. Imagine losing your life. There's a tough one. Do that until imagining this stops being stressful. I don't think you can do that in one session, one day. Please, in moderation, and judge for yourself what you're capable of. It's a little bit like going to the gym. You shouldn't overdo it. And here's another one. For optimal mental strength, practice imagining that everything you believe is wrong. And do that until it stops being stressful. Yeah, so many people suffer from the I am right complex. May I never be accused of that. That symptom, that disease, mental disease. It is a mental disease. Again, that's another thing that teachers and mental health professionals don't talk about. Somehow it doesn't make it on their radar, although it is an important problem to address. I also here have within the hexagon my 9 modes of thinking. No other mental activities or modes qualify as thinking. And I am usually careful not to misuse the word think. I don't use it as a synonym for believe. And it includes questioning any claim about anything. That's one mode, one of the simplest modes. And The fourth mode, converting X into its opposite. That's essentially thinking ironically, something too few people do very well. They cannot detect irony and they cannot produce it. Maybe the most difficult one is creating or discovering patterns. Another one, observing that every action has multiple causes and effects. That distinguishes us from animals. Animals can observe that certain actions result in certain effects, but they cannot process beyond that. They cannot process that multiple actions can produce an effect, and one action can have multiple effects in space and in time. Well, this, I hope, was helpful for you. If you know anyone who's struggling to be strong, you may want to recommend my Masters of Mind protocol. Good news, I finally managed to get the Criminal Bible on Lulu, and I'll try to provide live links in the show notes. It's up in 2 volumes. The black and white copy, soft cover copy is ready. Each volume is around 450 pages. That is why it had to be broken, especially for the 6 by 9 inch format. Well, I hope this was useful, and I hope everyone is well. Take care of yourselves and prepare, because I'm convinced things will not be very good in the near future. We may have just 3.5 more years. Yes, the year 2030 looks like it could be an important time. Yeah, well, I could expand, but in another lecture. Be well, everyone.